Find that still okay with you. We're going to record this.
Yes, yes.
And with that, I would like to say good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to what is the first of what we know will be mini cyber talks with industry leaders. We're excited to have students from all 23 schools of Carolina Cyber Network here today. We expect that there are. It's truly a treat. To have with us one of my favorite cybersecurity experts and speakers, someone who has influenced the field for decades. Roger Grimes is the data-driven defense evangelist at KnowBe4, a 36-year-old computer security veteran, the author of 15 books, over 1,500 articles. He's worked with companies like Foundstone, McAfee, Microsoft, and he's a frequent voice in the media and at global conferences. On a personal note, I first reached out to Roger back in 2019 after reading one of his articles on email security, and since then I've been grateful to call him a friend. His insights are practical, thought-provoking, and always on point for what we face in cybersecurity today. Roger's presentation will run, I think we got you for 60 to 90 minutes here, but we'll leave time for Q&A at the end. So please drop your questions in the chat during the talk so that we can address as many as possible. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce Roger Grimes. Thank you, Roger.
Thank you. Ed, that's got to be one of the best introductions I've ever had. So thank you so much. Let me go ahead and get my presentation. Let's see. Here we go. And I think this talk will be about 45, 50 minutes, followed by Q&A. I've kind of shortened it so I don't bore people to death. Let me see if I get this. Hopefully you're seeing it. But what I will say is that this is probably the only type of talk of this nature you're probably going to ever see for a long time, because I am not out to try to do something little or promote a particular product. I'm out to fix the entire internet. I want to make it significantly harder for hackers and their malware creations to hide and get rid of them. And I know I have a solution that would work, that if enabled and I'm going to present that solution to you. I think there's many solutions that could defeat hackers and malware. And I think the reason why I'm doing this talk is that I think most of us, especially the longer you've been in this field, the longer you've been a cybersecurity practitioner, you start to feel kind of defeated. And you think that we have to put up with hackers and malware, and no matter what we do, the hackers and malware are always going to win. And that is true today. But it doesn't have to be that way. The reason why it is that way is we are not doing the solutions that would significantly defeat hackers and malware. And I'm here today to tell you that there are solutions that will significantly defeat hackers and malware. And this is one of them, one that I really think, again, as Ed just said, I just updated this a little bit. They even gave me a new title of work. I'm now a CISO advisor. Used to be data-driven defense evangelist. Now I'm a CISO advisor. And I've been doing cybersecurity since 1987, which means I've been doing this for 38 years. I've written 15 books, and I'm working on my 16th book right now called How AI and Quantum Impacts Cyber Threats and Defenses. But my 15th book is called The Taming the Hacker Storm, which is this talk, and you don't need to go buy that book unless you want to get more details on things. But I cover it quite well in this talk today. I do currently work for KnowBe4. I've been with KnowBe4 over 7.5 years. That's been my favorite place I've ever worked. And KnowBe4 is the leading human risk management company trying to prevent humans from making mistakes and bad decisions in cybersecurity. Mostly, a lot of it's educating them to not fall for phishing attacks and that sort of stuff. And we'll talk about why that's important. But what I'm doing today is not necessarily on behalf of KnowBe4, even though I'm wearing a KnowBe4 shirt. And that's because if my solution ultimately was adopted, it might put KnowBe4 out of work. I'm trying to get rid of all hackers and malware and put a whole lot of cybersecurity places out of work, even myself possibly. I don't know. But I say don't fear if you got a career in cybersecurity, because nobody's implementing a workable solution anytime soon. As a matter of fact, I was at Black Hat, the industry's largest conference, and RSA. I go there every year, and you're surrounded by hundreds of vendors and tens of thousands of attendees. And I suddenly realized the last time I was there that, and I think it was Black Hat just a couple of weeks ago in August, that there is nobody here that's doing anything that's going to significantly fix internet security and really get rid of hackers and malware. Every company there is doing something that fixes a little piece of the problem, and they may do a good job or bad job at fixing their piece of the pie, but it doesn't fix it all. Well, I'm out to fix it all. That's what today's talk is. So we're going to talk about how bad internet security is today, the main underlying problem that my solution solves, my solution, and then hopefully we'll have good talks, discussions, and debates about it, and find out. We all learn by having debate, even if you disagree with my solution. But how bad is internet security? Well, there's over 1.12 billion websites worldwide, if you didn't know that, and over 250,000 are added every single day, and about 10% of them are malicious. So about 25,000 new malicious websites every day. And according to Google, the average malicious website exists for less than 10 minutes. Basically, these websites are generated on the fly. They have a URL that they trick a potential victim into clicking on that's unique for that victim. It then generates the website, and it then tries to trick you out of a password or trick you into downloading malware. And then after that's done, it closes the website. So it's what this is to say is that it's very difficult for Google or anybody to track down the malicious websites because they are on their own not lasting for 10 minutes, right? So very difficult to track, very difficult to create a block list or something like that because they just don't exist very long. If you didn't know this, most internet traffic is malicious. 73% of internet traffic is malicious. So we're all paying for high-speed internet to our homes and high-speed 5G network for our phones. And most of that is supporting malicious internet traffic. Imagine how much faster the internet would be for us if we didn't have all this maliciousness on it. Most emails are malicious. 57% of emails are malicious. And a lot of times you might say, well, man, I don't get that many in my inbox. And that's because you have all kinds of companies like Microsoft and Google and stuff like that in your software that is blocking these malicious emails from getting to your inbox. But about 1 in 7 bad emails makes it past the defenses that people then have to interact with in one way or another. The biggest cause for most successful hacking is social engineering. Social engineering is somebody that's trying to trick you into doing something that would harm either your own interest or your company's interest. 70 to 90% of all internet crime involves social engineering, involves tricking someone into doing something that they shouldn't do. Again, that's what my company KnowBe4 fights the most today. But I love this stat from Barracuda Networks that blows me away, and it's regarding spear phishing. Spear phishing is a particular type of phishing, social engineering, where the hacker is targeting you or a group you belong to. Maybe they're targeting C-level employees. Maybe they're targeting somebody that likes to do scrapbooking. But spear phishing is they're targeting a smaller number of people. And Barracuda Networks reported that while spear phishing makes up less than 0.1%, less than a tenth of all email attacks, it's responsible for 2/3 of all breaches. Not 2/3 of breaches from email, 2/3 of all successful breaches goes to one thing, spear phishing. And what this tells me is that if you don't solve social engineering and spear phishing and stuff like that, you're not solving internet security. That's the biggest thing that you got to solve, is that right there. We all know text messaging is oftentimes malicious. There was over 1 million intentionally malicious emails sent via SMS every minute, and also to WhatsApp and Telegram and Signal and that sort of stuff. The stat that blew me away is that 8.9 to 14.5% of recipients actually click on the malicious links in those text messages. That just kind of blew me away, right? That 10 to 15% basically of people that get these messages believe them. They actually think that FedExpress is trying to deliver a package to their house and click on those links, or that Netflix, wants their credit card updated or whatever it might be. There's also a lot of attacks against vulnerabilities. Google Mandiant, one of the most trusted names in the industry, said that 33% of data breaches involve software and firmware vulnerabilities. Last year, we had over 40,000 separate publicly announced vulnerabilities that we were told that we had to patch. That's over 110 day after day after day. And every year, you can see every year is just new record. This year, we're on record for doing 45,000 at least. So that's certainly a real problem. There are over 1 billion individual malware programs. That's why your antivirus can't detect anything these days. And over 500,000 are created or detected every single day. So that's just what we detect. That's pretty wild. 500,000 new malware programs are detected every single day. And let me tell you, they can't keep up with it. So how bad is it? And this is a stat that blew me away when I first researched it. 4 out of 10 organizations self-report that they are breached each year. That blew me away when I first read that 40% of organizations experience a data breach each year. I thought that must be an outlier. So I did more research and I couldn't find a report that was reporting on how common organizations are compromised that didn't say at least 40%. Some said 60, 66%. And then a couple of weeks ago, I ran into this Forrester report that said it's 67. 67% of companies are breached at least once a year, if not more. And the average company is breached 3 times a year. And this means, ransomware attacks, social engineering, malware, password stealing Trojans, whatever. And that's self-reported, right? You would think that most people compromised aren't reporting it, but and let me say it's every survey, every study I've ever looked at showed it at least 40%, and many of them 60%. This even in the book, I say one of the things that is most surprising to me is how bad hacking is, and that we're not trying to fix it in any significant way. I would have never, the 1987 Roger Grimes would have never imagined that ransomware was shutting down entire companies, cities, police stations, and that we were just putting up with it. Like I would have thought that we would have done something, and that's the biggest surprise of my cybersecurity career is how bad it's gotten, and we just seem to keep doing the same thing and wondering how come it's not working. Well, today I'm putting a line in the sand, and I'm asking people to do something different. So part of this started back in early 1990s. I started asking myself, why do we have so many hacking and malware programs? Beginning 90s, middle 90s. I was like, not only do we have a whole lot of hackers and malware, but it's getting worse every year, and it has. Every single year for 38 years, it's just gotten worse. And I started asking myself, why is it? Why do we have so much hacking on the internet? And let me say, part of it is the internet, right? It allows criminals to reach hundreds of millions of people and try to exploit them. Although we did have hackers and malware before the internet, but it just took longer for them to spread around the world. But and it's going to sound silly here, but I thought about this for years. I was like, why is it so bad? And then when the answer hit me, I realized it's so obvious. I can't believe I didn't know the answer just off the top of my head, but it was like, duh. The reason why we have so many hackers and malware is that we can't arrest them. Like they're getting away with it. And the reason why we can't arrest them is that we can't even stop them, much less arrest them. But the reason why is when someone connects to us or sends us a file, they can claim to be anybody. They can claim to be Bill Gates. They can claim to be Facebook tech support. And we have no easy way of knowing whether that person is or isn't who they're claiming to be. Or if you get a file update that claims to be a file update from Facebook or Adobe, Acrobat, or Microsoft, there is no easy way right now to know whether that person or that thing really is what it says it is. And the best we can do is block, a particular attack. Someone sends us an email and we're like, oh, that's a scam, and we delete it. But that scammer can still go on to scam 600 million other people that day or tomorrow or the next day. Like they just can claim to be whoever they want and do different scams. And because we can't reliably identify who's connecting to us, we certainly can't block them permanently, and we certainly can't arrest them.
I'm the supposedly famous Bill Gates, but I'm only famous because I listen to what this guy, Roger Grimes, tells me. Without him, I'm a nerd begging for dollars on the street.
And with AI deepfakes coming, anybody can claim to be anybody really easily, right? All you need is a picture, 6 seconds of their audio, and anybody can create a reliable deepfake that claims to be anybody. It's just going to get worse this year and next. And again, I compare this like in America, if you rob a bank, and there were about 1,200, 1,300 bank robberies a year. It's actually been a low. It used to be in the 90s, it was higher, but there's less and less bank robberies today every year. But almost everybody that robs a bank gets caught. About half of all bank robbers get caught during their first bank robbery, and the rest keep robbing banks till they get caught. And so most people that rob a bank, at least in America, they get caught, identified, arrested, charged, tried, and put in jail. And if they get out and they rob banks again, they get caught, identified, arrested, charged, tried, and put in jail even longer. And that punishment and being put in jail and being identified the rest of your life as a bank robber, that's a tough one to put on your resume, makes it so that most of us, even if we're down on our luck, don't rob banks, right? Because we're going to get caught. We're going to be punished. But on the internet, anybody, and let me say, there are tens of thousands, possibly 1 million people every day trying to rob you on the internet. And they will almost never get caught. They can rob and rob and rob. And the only possibility for them is that they may be stopped during a particular attack, but they're not likely to be identified. They're certainly not likely to be arrested. It's all profit, very little risk. And let's say that you're a friend of somebody that's robbing people on the internet. You're in Nigeria, and you're an honest person, ethical person, you don't want to rob people, but you're watching your friend or your best friend that's robbing people every day, and that guy's getting rich, and he's getting jewelry, and he's getting cars, and he's getting pretty girlfriends and all that stuff. That can be incentive for an otherwise ethical person to get into crime, especially they were being told, oh, it's a victimless crime, they have insurance and it covers it all. And so the way the internet makes it, because we can't identify them or arrest them, it creates more hackers and malware every single year. And let me say, even if we could identify them, we probably couldn't arrest them because they're oftentimes from different countries where our legal jurisdictions don't apply. So the reason, again, why hackers and their malware creations are so prolific is we cannot stop them, we cannot reliably block them, we cannot punish them, and we cannot arrest them. We need to change that problem, and that's what my solution does. And let me say that my main solution kind of goes along this line, is that in real life, when we need to know someone's true identity, so someone's connecting to me claiming to be Bill Gates or something, for any reason, we can ask for reliable identification. If you go to the bank, if you go to the liquor store, if you go, anywhere where they think that they need to know your real identity, if a cop stops you in a car, they can say, let me see your driver's license or your passport or something like that. Or we go to the airport to travel, we need to see your driver's license, your real ID. And if that person says no, you say, hey, I want to see your, real identification, reliable identification before I continue doing this transaction. Well, you can then say, well, I'm not going to do business with you. I'm not going to allow you to fly. I'm not going to allow you to drive a car. I'm not going to allow you to buy alcohol. That's how we handle this problem in real life. And so that, again, if someone asks us to provide a reliable identification and we don't, that person could say, well, I'm not doing business with you then, because I know I asked you for your identification and you decided not to provide it to me. And either I still work with you, or I decide that maybe I'm not going to take the risk of working with you, that maybe you really aren't from Microsoft. Well, that's what my solution tries to fix. My solution is called pervasive selective trust. It has a lot to do with trust. Everything we do is about trust or lack of trust. Trust is the idea that someone or something that you're interacting with is who they say they are, and they're acting as expected. So if I decide that I want to buy pizza from Domino's Pizza, I get on the internet and I go to a website that says Domino's, and hopefully it's the right Domino's website, or I call them at a number. They answer, they take my order. 30 minutes later, someone shows up at my door in a Domino's Pizza uniform. They have a little Domino's Pizza sign on their car. I open up the door, they give me the pizza, I pay them the money, and I don't get botulism. I don't die because I eat the pizza, right? Like, there's a lot of trust going on. And when a cop stops you, it could be somebody faking being a cop, but 99.999% of the time, a person dressed in a cop uniform in a cop car is a cop, and we pay attention to them. We get married to people that we trust, that they are who they say they are, and that they have our best interest at heart. And if that ceases to be the case, we get a divorce or something like that. So I'm hoping, what I want to do is put trust out on the internet, that when someone says they are someone, that you can trust that. Or if they send you a file and say that it's a Adobe Acrobat update, that it really is an Adobe Acrobat update. My solution is, are you who you say you are? And is that program, service, app, link, file, phone number, message, or content what you says it is? That's what I'm trying to fix. Trying to make it harder for hackers to hide their true identity. So this is what this next bullet point right here is the majority of my solution. I've got some other stuff, but it's the majority of the solution, which is allow anyone to validate anyone else's true identity when they're getting ready to interact, if desired. So it could be the other person says, nope, I don't want to give you my true identity. Cool. Then you can choose whether you're going to continue to interact with them on the internet or not. I call this in the book a real ID. It's not the same as the United States legal definition of real ID that you need in an airport or to travel, but it's similar. In my mind, a real ID is a secure identity, strong authentication, strongly assured to be your identity, that's difficult for a hacker to steal and use somewhere else. And we do have existing things like that. Like, here's my FIDO-enabled YubiKey. It's very difficult for a hacker to steal this, at least remotely, and to use it. They have a hard time getting my secret, my private key off of this thing. And I would tie it to a real human identity or a company. So if I say I'm Roger Grimes or Bill Gates, I really would be Roger Grimes or Bill Gates. If I say I work for KnowBe4 or Microsoft, I really do work for KnowBe4 or Microsoft. And in my solution, a person must show up in person, like at the DMV, to get their online real identity. So essentially, I'm trying to duplicate like a driver's license or a passport, but something online. Called the Real ID. And again, allow anyone that's interacting with anybody else, if someone's asking for money, if they're asking you to do something, if you want to, you can say, I need to know your real ID. Like, I would be able to say, hey, I'll take an email from anyone, but I want to know the person's real name when they're emailing me. I don't want any anonymous emails. And again, that other person can say, no, I'm not going to provide that. And then you can treat that accordingly, choose not to interact with them or interact with them, but knowing that there may be some trust issues in there, along with some other components of trust that I'm going to cover over the next couple of minutes. And overall, I call my solution this pervasive high trust ecosystem that replaces the pervasive anonymity that's on the internet today, where anybody and anyone can claim to be anything so easily. In my solution, there's three major types of identity. The real ID I just talked about. Again, this is strong authentication, strongly assured, tied to a real human identity, and then everything else. So it's one or the other. You're either providing real ID or you're providing something that's not real ID. Today, most identities on the internet are known as pseudo identities. Meaning that, you can, when you go to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, you can put in a handle or an account name that is anything, right? I can go on Twitter and Instagram and put in my login name as, Bill Gates, 1962. And as long as that service validates that, they usually will send an email to your personal email. As long as you say yes, and that label, Bill Gates 1962 is available, you can have it, even though I'm not Bill Gates, right? My name's not Bill Gates. But on the internet today, you can pretty much call yourself almost anything on any. I can call myself best fisherman in the world, right? And Twitter and Instagram are not going to care, right? They just care that I'm able to say, yes, this is my personal email address or something like that. So most of the stuff on the internet the identity is not strongly assured. It is not strongly tied to a human identity or organization. Even like I'm Roger G at KnowBe4, which is not bad. That's what I got when I joined the company. But if I left KnowBe4 and another Roger G came, they could, if they wanted to, give him the same email address, right? Or, if I leave the company, they could give my email address to my boss or something like that to answer emails on my behalf. There is nothing strongly tying my particular identity, even to my work email address, even though it kind of functions that way while I'm at KnowBe4. And then, some of the identities are really anonymous for people like, I don't want to give any identity at all. I just want to be completely anonymous. So in my system, someone can ask you if they want to on a per connection basis, per service, per site, per connection basis, hey, I want to see your real ID before we go forward. And you can say no if you want to. Or someone can say you need to provide your real ID. And again, you can say no, or they can say no, or you can provide the real ID to continue on. So on here, this is my major part of the solution here. On every connection, anyone can choose what major type of identity to use or acquire from the other side for the connection to go forward. That's my solution, the main part of my solution. And again, it has a lot to do with what's called identity proofing. Supposedly, when a service or a company, anyone that gives you an identity is known as a identity service provider. So when you go to, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all of them, every website you join, you're essentially getting some sort of identity in their service, although it may be tied to your personal email address. But they're called an identity service provider. And they, a lot of times they're supposed to do some sort of proofing before they give it to you. If they didn't, then anybody could have any identity and anybody would claim to be anybody. So a lot of times they need to do some sort of identity proofing, although usually it's very weakly confirmed. Usually they just send, most services, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram stuff, they just send an email to your personal email account and they said, click here to validate that you are who you, and when you do that, you get that identity. On the other side of things, it could be strongly assured, like going to get your driver's license. To get a driver's license at your DMV in America, you got to show up in person. You got to bring your birth certificate, other articles proving your name and your birth, usually bills showing your current address or something. And that's, and then sometimes you have to take a test. And then you get issued that ID. That would be a strongly assured identity, your driver's license, your passport, that sort of stuff. And then everything's in between would be considered medium assurance. I show up at KnowBe4, and let me say, I had to prove that I was an American citizen to work at KnowBe4 to get by what's called the ICD-9 check. But how well that's really verified is probably less assured than if I went to the DMV or went to go get my passport. But what I want for real ID is something that's strongly assured, had to show up in person to get it, that type of thing. And let me say, we all have different identity personas, different IDs we use between work. I have a work email address, I have a personal email address. So any internet trusted identity ecosystem will have to support multiple personas per person. And like in this example, my persona, one persona A could be a real ID identity that I use at KnowBe4, tied to my email address, rogerg@knowbe4.com, and it's tied to my employer, KnowBe4. So if I presented it to you, you would know for sure that I work at knowbe4.com. My persona B is a real ID tied to my personal email address at home, rogerg@banneretcs.com. And maybe it also has attributes that says, yep, I live in Tampa, Florida. And maybe, yes, I'm older than 21, so I can buy liquor online without having, or wine without having to tell them my date of birth. Persona C is a pseudo identity that I use I guess this could be one that I use at work, I guess, that would be my X account, Twitter account, or something like that. Persona D is a Gmail account that I opened up with Google, right? Just a personal email account. It's not really strongly attested. And I could at times have times when I want to be anonymous. So I call it attempted anonymity. I used to call it assured anonymity, but the truth is today, no one can be anonymous on the internet without a lot of hard extra work. So I now call it attempted anonymity. But there's times like when I want to, I don't know, I would love when some company wants me to register, if I didn't have to register, to get them to send me their document, because I don't want to get a lot of spam email and stuff. Or maybe I want to go to a political protest and I don't want the U.S. government knowing that I'm going to the protest. Or maybe I'm somebody that's in AA recovering from drug addiction and I want to be able to join an online AA group without identifying myself. There are times when all of us probably want to be anonymous. So again, my system and other solutions have to take into account that we do have different identity personas. And again, my persona A, the real ID at work, maybe that's what I use to log into my Know Before network and to go to the Know Before YouTube X accounts and stuff like that. My persona B is my real ID that I use to connect to my bank account, my stock account, my health assurance account. Bank of America says, hey, before we allow you to connect, we need to know that it's really you. Or maybe Bank of America allows me to connect with a pseudo identity, my regular email address. But if I go to transfer $10,000 to a new Russian bank, they're like, I'm sorry, we need to have you re-log in with your real ID, something known as dynamic authentication, stepping up the authentication. And then I have personas C and D, where I'm just, connecting to my regular personal Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube accounts. I don't want them compromised or anything, but I don't care as much if they are to be compromised, so I don't have to use a real ID there. And again, I'm using attempted anonymity. Maybe Bank of America requires that I use real ID, but maybe if I connect to a cryptocurrency bank in Switzerland or something, maybe they don't care who I am and I'm allowed to be anonymous. All they care about is that my wallet, my cryptocurrency wallet's valid. This is the way my system would kind of work, again, on a per person, per connection, per site, per service basis. That side or me can choose which type of identity to provide, real ID or not. So, but we do need more than trusted user IDs. We do need a whole pervasive trusted ecosystem. We need trusted devices, trusted operating systems, trusted applications, trusted actions, trusted networks. Let me say, all of that we kind of already have. I'm going to talk about that. We just need to use it more consistently and pervasively in a particular way. But we already have all of that. Only thing new we have to invent in my pervasive trusted ecosystem is something I call it like the DNS of the internet, but for internet security. And I call it the Trust Assurance Service. Well, I put all of that together. And when you connect to things or people connect to you, they look at all of those things to determine whether or not you should be trusted or not on a per connection, per service, per site basis. You don't have to always be fully trusted. But if the other side, like Bank of America, says, we want to know that you're fully trusted, they can require that you use real ID and trusted devices and trusted operating systems, trusted applications, and things like that. And in my system, let's say here I've got 3 levels, what I call trust assurance levels. In the book, I actually had 5. I've simplified it down in my presentation now, where there's just 3 trust assurance levels. Basically, you have the top 2, level 2 and 3. They're the exact. What levels 2 and 3 means is that you meet all of this. You have trusted devices, trusted operating systems, trusted identities, trusted applications. And if you don't, you end up in level 1, which is you don't have all of that trust. So you're either using a high security control across the entire trust stack, or you aren't. The only difference between level 2 and 3 is that at level 3, the US government controls it, or the Chinese whatever country you're in would control level 3. And that's just me attesting to that, each nation state kind of controls at the highest level, who has the, top secret security clearances and who can see, nuclear weapons and things like that. Level 3 recognizes that there is an extra special level for nation states where they get to decide who belongs and what the controls are. But you'll have a lot of people going, I don't want the US government, involved in my security. Cool. You should be level 2 then. Level 2 is the same high level of trust assurance controls, but it's open source, or maybe Microsoft or Google or someone's involved. We kind of get to choose, but the government, the US government's not involved in level 2. So that you can still require all those same controls and trust, but not have the U.S. government involved. And so again, either in my solution, you either meet all of this full trust ecosystem across the trust stack, or you don't. And then we can require that of other people when they want to do business with us. Or other people can require that. They can say, hey, I'm sorry, you need to be a level 2 in order to transfer $10,000 from your bank account. So in my solution, every device is able to have multiple trust levels in it. You can actually, it's your trust levels are determined on a per connection basis, per site, per service basis. And that device is segmented in such a way that you can connect to multiple different services at different trust levels, all from the same device. So I could, from the same computer, connect to Instagram using trust assurance level 1 or being anonymous. Maybe I work on a government project, so I can connect on trust assurance level 3 when connecting to, the government website. And then the rest of my connections, for going to work, going to my bank, that sort of stuff, maybe that's a level 2 Real ID trust level assurance. And so in my solution, this trusted ecosystem, different devices can connect to one or more levels that correspond to the sites or services that they're connecting to and what they require. So again, on a per connection basis, even from the same device. And again, for identity, looking at this for levels 2 and 3, in order to have a trusted identity, it would have to be a real ID. Again, that's something tied to a real identity. It has to be strong authentication, which I say is phishing resistant, multi-factor, and bound. And identities and authentication, your authentication can be bound or roaming. Bound means that it's bound to a particular device. You had to register to get it. You had to show up in person to get it. It could be registered to your phone. It could be registered to your laptop. But the idea when an authentication is bound, it can't be used on another device. So that if somebody was to steal this and try to use it on another device, it wouldn't work or wouldn't work well. Contrast that with roaming. A roaming authenticator, like your login name and password for most sites, you can go to anybody's computer, go to your website, put in your login name and password, and get in. That's called roaming. Well, to be in levels 2 and 3, you have to have a strong authentication, multi-factor, and it's bound. And you had to show up in person to receive it. Like going to the DMV. And additionally, that identity or your computer has not been reported as being compromised or confirmed to be currently involved in malicious actions. So that trust assurance service is this additional check saying, maybe someone successfully had some trick and they stole my identity. We could still report that stolen identity, or somebody else could say, hey, I got connected to by Roger, but it's malicious, and it would be marked as malicious, and anybody that's in the system would know that my stolen identity was being used maliciously. So in my system, your identity to get in levels 2 and 3, real ID, strong authentication, phishing resistant, multi-factor, bound authentication, person had to show up in person to receive, and it's not currently, your identity or your computer is not currently reported as compromised. But we do need more than just identity. We need safe and secure devices, because if a hacker can take over your phone or your computer or whatever, then they can steal your authentication. They can steal your identity. They can be on your computer doing something malicious using your real identity, right? And let me say, every day, millions of people's computers and devices and phones get taken over. So we have to make sure we have safe and secure devices. We have to have verified device identities to be able to assure that the same device is or isn't connecting to us over and over again, and that our hardware and our operating system is secure and not been compromised. So first, we got to make sure that when we're coming from our devices, that they're the same devices. Or if you don't know this, when you connect to your bank or Facebook or Twitter or Microsoft or whatever, they do look to see, are you coming from the same type of computer, the same device? And if not, they'll ask you to re-authenticate or to provide some other type of thing. Maybe they'll send you a MFA code you have to type in. But Microsoft and Facebook and Twitter and Instagram know that if you're logging in from a new device or even a new browser, that increases the risk that your identity was stolen. So they want to verify, are you coming from the same device or not? Because if you are coming from a different device, then they might apply more or stronger authentication The best way to do that, and there's like 20 ways to do it. You could do it by IP address, you could do it by MAC address, you could do it by what's known as the user agent string. All of those things can be forged, can be faked. The one that can't, the only device identity I know that cannot be easily stolen or faked is a device ID digital certificate. And let me say this, there's already an open standard for this that already exists by the Trusted Computing Group. They created this a bunch of years ago that said that we have this digital certificate and it's created by the device manufacturer, and the device manufacturer creates this digital certificate for the device that gives the device its name, unique name, and they install it on the hardware in the device. So it can be installed, it could be stored on what we call the Trusted Platform Module chip or some other secure chip, but it can be securely queried to prove, is that device the same device or is it a different device? And again, this is already an open standard. It's been available for many years. The problem is none of the manufacturers do it. But in my solution, in order for you to be in the full trust stack, the device manufacturer would have to start creating and using this device ID. So this is something that doesn't exist. Well, it exists, but it's not widely used, if at all. But we would have to say that to the device developers, hey, I'm not going to buy your laptop, I'm not going to buy your phone unless you have a device ID in there. And let me say, in order for this sort of thing to happen, to have trusted device IDs and trusted hardware boot and trusted OS boot and stuff, it really needs to be enforced by a hardware chip. And if you don't know this, most of our devices already have this. If you have a Windows, an Apple, or an Android device, it already has one of these trusted, what's called hardware cryptographic root of trust chips that stores and enforces integrity of the hardware and the operating system. Most of us already have this and don't even know it. But the first one of this type of this root of trust chip was created by the Trusted Computing Group in 2003. They created an open standard called the Trusted Platform Module chip, TPM chip. And it started to be included in computers in a large way when Windows Vista started coming out. Microsoft started requiring a TPM chip in any enterprise version of Windows. If you had Enterprise for Home, you probably didn't have it, but if you had Enterprise Windows from Windows Vista since 2007 and later, if you have a Windows laptop, a Windows computer that's an Enterprise Edition of Windows, it also has a TPM chip that is used. Starting with Windows 11, that also applies to consumers. You have to have a Trusted Platform Module chip. Apple created a similar thing. It's not an open standard, it's a private thing, but they created something called the Secure Enclave chip or T2 chip that's been in every Apple device or most Apple devices since 2012. And Android got on it with what was called the Titan M2 chip since 2018. So most of us already have this and don't even know. But again, it allows a hardware enforced integrity check of the hardware and the operating system. And you can check, if you have a Windows machine, you can go into your BIOS or your UEFI, your Universal Extensible Firmware Interface, open up that BIOS, and you'll see that you're probably secure boot is enabled. And secure boot means that you have this TPM chip and it enforces the integrity of the hardware, the firmware, and even the low level of the operating system. Apple has had the same thing, although you have to go on the startup security utility, and you'll see that more than likely you have secure boot, full security enabled. And this has been this way for, a decade plus, and most people just don't know it. But not every device has this. So your TV probably doesn't have it and things. What I would say is that your TV, your car, every device should have a TPM chip in it to enforce and make sure the hardware is strong and the operating system is strong. And again, in my world, in my solution, in order for you to be at levels 2 and 3, your device would have to have a device ID digital certificate, hardware enforced secure boot, and not reported as being compromised. And let me say, I'm getting ready to talk about a term called hypervisor. Hypervisor was actually created in the 1960s for mainframes, but they're used all over computers and phones today. Hypervisor is a special area of memory set aside and protected so that hackers can't break into it, or if they're inside of a hypervisor, they can't easily break out to it and get into other areas of memory or other hypervisors. If you've ever used a virtual machine, most virtual machines run in a a hypervisor, and they can be hardware or software enforced. The hardware enforced hypervisors are better. Again, most of our devices, most of our operating systems have already been doing this for a long time. But I would just say in order to be in levels 1 and 2, you would have to have a hardware enforced hypervisor. Again, in Windows, you can go into your BIOS, your UEFI setup, and you'll see that if you're in secure boot, especially if you're in UEFI mode, for sure, that means that your operating system has OS secure boot and OS memory protections. And in Windows, you've actually started to have these things since Windows XP Service Pack 2. So it's been around for a long time, although it's had different names. These days, they call it virtualization-based security. If you have Windows, you can go into a DOS prompt, type in MS-Info32, and it will bring up a whole list of things. But if you go to the bottom, you'll see that you have virtualization-based security running, which means you have a hardware-enforced hypervisor that is protecting the Windows operating system. And let me say, Apple has this, Android has this, and because of this, there haven't been a lot of rootkits, bootkits, and boot viruses. When I started in computers in 1987, boot viruses were all the rage, and they infected people a lot. But now that most operating systems have this hardware enforced hypervisor that protects the operating system, you don't hear as much about rootkits, bootkits, and root viruses and boot viruses and stuff like that. They still exist. They do get invented time to time, but they never go anywhere because we have hardware enforced hypervisors. And let me say, my favorite solution is an operating system called Cubes OS. You can actually go to cubes-os.org and download it for free. It's a Linux-like operating system, but it takes these hypervisors, hardware enforced hypervisor, security domain isolation, to the nth degree. It actually allows you to put every application. You can actually run multiple operating systems, multiple applications, all on the same computer, all on the same desktop. I love it. Cubes OS has been around for about 10 years, and it's the most secure operating system on the planet. Only thing that's bad is you have to know Linux and know Linux fairly well to use it. But it allows you to actually run many different operating systems and many different applications all at the same time from the same desktop, and they're all on their own hardware enforced hypervisor. In this screenshot example, I'm running in a level 3 hypervisor, a Microsoft Windows 11, and I'm using Microsoft Word. Then in the green one, I call it level 4, but it's just I'm probably running OpenBSD and Opera browser. And then in the green ones, I'm running level 0 or 1, untrusted, there's no security configuration. I'm running, in that case, I'm probably running some version of Linux, or Whonix is a version of Linux that tries to allow you to be anonymous and use the Tor network and all that stuff. So I love Cubes OS because it has all this hardware enforced hypervisor isolation for all these different applications and operating systems. My mother, God rest her soul, used to be compromised all the time. I couldn't stop her from being compromised all the time. But I switched her from Windows to Cubes OS, and she never got compromised again. Like, they would compromise her email, but they couldn't get to her other passwords, and so they were never able to take over her system. So I love Cubes OS. And let me say that both Microsoft and Apple are trying to get to what Cubes OS has today. They've been trying to move. They got to move slowly because they break a lot of stuff. They go right away. But one day, both Apple and Windows will have the same security protection that Cubes has had for 10 years already. And I love Cubes OS. Again, in my solution, your operating system would have to have a hardware enforced OS secure boot, all critical patches applied, and you and your computer cannot have been currently reported as being compromised or being used maliciously. And again, this is mostly already exists. You already do have hardware. And if you have Apple or Windows or Android or Google Chrome or whatever, you already have a hardware enforced OS secure boot. The only thing is, I'd also say that you'd have to be fully patched in order to get, a fully trusted operating system in there. We also need trusted applications. And let me say, this is almost already the case. device, at least for your phone. To download applications to an iPhone or to an Android device, you have to go to the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store, and that's where supposedly they've looked at these applications, made sure they are secure before you download them. My solution of trusted apps is something that works on every device, not just phones, and it has a few more checks in it than you get. It has like self-checking, and you have to have secure defaults, and the programmers had to be trained in secure code in order to get on the list as of a trusted application. But again, to be in levels 2 and 3, you would have to be using a hardware enforced, hypervisor protected, digitally signed, trusted application with all the patches applied. Otherwise, you end up in level 1. And let me say those applications would have to have trusted actions defined. And if you don't know this already, when you do different things on different sites and services, they will many times detect you as doing something that's high or low trust. Like if you go to Amazon and you go to buy something like buy toilet tissue and send it to your house, it'll allow you to do it with one click, right? Buy now, and it sends it to your house. But if you go to buy a expensive TV and ship it to a new address, Amazon realized that could be a hacker that has stolen your ID. And they will ask you to re-log in. Maybe they even send you a verification code you have to type in. And that's because, again, Amazon has realized that certain actions that you do are trustworthy and other ones aren't, are higher risk. And so they'll ask for, again, a step up in your authentication. So what I'm saying in my solution is that all the trusted applications have to have these trusted actions defined. So if someone's doing something that's more high risk, the service provider can do a step up in dynamic authentication. And again, to be in levels 2 and 3, you would have to be using a trusted application with defined trusted actions, and not in that application cannot have been reported as involved in malicious activity. Trusted networks, you would have to originate from a known good trusted network. And let me say that there are a lot, Microsoft and Google and even KnowBe4, we are going through millions every day, millions of reports of, spams and phishing. And we kind of know, yeah, that's a bad Russian network, right? Or that's a bad Chinese network, or that's a bad Iranian controlled network. That, the major service providers or security providers like Microsoft and Google and KnowBe4 and stuff, they kind of know what the bad networks are. So in order to be in, my levels 2 and 3, your computer, your identity would have to originate from a more trusted network, that is not currently confirmed as being a frequent origination point of maliciousness. So if you're coming from, your local Starbucks, we would trust it. But if you're all of a sudden your ID is coming from a known Russian network where there's a lot of, malware coming from, nope, it wouldn't be. And lastly, everything I just mentioned already exists. This is the only thing that we need to create. I call it the trust assurance service. Every node in level 2 and 3 would have to have a local trust assurance service running on that device and have to interoperate with a global trust assurance service that has like a global allow and block list. So the local trust assurance service, it's something locally in every device. It interfaces with the user if needed. It manages the user's own trusted identities and personas. It allows users to select different identities and personas for particular applications, sites, and services. Most of the people in my system would not interface with this local trust assurance service. Their system would be defined. When they connect to Bank of America, it would say, hey, you need to use your real ID, and it would be installed in the system, and they wouldn't be asked to make a trust system. But if somebody knew what they were doing and wanted to have more versatility, they could pull up the local trust assurance service and say, hey, I want to use this ID. Here's kind of how, this is kind of a bad mock-up of how I kind of see it working, where you're running, in this case for this mock-up, locally trusted application, Microsoft Outlook. It's a level 2 application with high trust, and you're running it with your level 2 real identity, Roger G at Banneret CS, and it's a bound authentication. I'm not sharing any attributes at this moment, but then it says, hey, if you want to, you can start another instance of Outlook and maybe use a level 1 identity, or maybe be anonymous. Maybe I want to register for a political protest. I could actually open an additional instance of Microsoft Outlook and go, hey, I would like to be anonymous for this instance. And you would know by how the application applications are color coded. And the same thing, suppose you're running an application that people are allowed to connect to, like Microsoft FTP server, and they allow you to connect to, you allow people to connect to your FTP server, upload and download files. It could be that, if someone's connecting with a level 2 identity and a level 2 application, if you're running a level 2 identity and a level 2 application, they just get allowed to connect, right? If you've allowed them. But suppose someone's connecting with a level, in this mock-up, I have somebody that's got a level 2 identity, my wife, but she's connecting with a level 1 FTP client. When SAP FTP is one of the most popular FTP clients in the world, but let's say it was a level 1, my local trust assurance would pop up and go, do you want to allow this once, allow it permanently, or deny it? So you would have the choice if you wanted to have that choice. And let me say, one of the best things I like about the local trust assurance is anytime someone sends you an email address, a file, a URL, a phone number, a file name, it is automatically submitted up to the global trust assurance to see if it's been reported as being used malicious, and allows you to easily report everything you get that's something that could be used to compromise you is automatically reported to the global trust assurance service, and it's color coded. So that if an email address has been reported as being used maliciously but hasn't been confirmed yet, that would be in yellow. An email address that has been reported as being malicious and confirmed as being malicious would be colored in red. And if it was reported but confirmed not being malicious, it would be green. So in my system, anytime someone sends you a connection point, a phone number, a file name, a link, an email address that could be used in tricking you, your system, the local trust assurance service, automatically submits it to the global trust assurance service, and it just has one question. It's like a DNS packet, just one packet, one question. In this case, it would be, has this thing been reported and confirmed as being used malicious? And then depending on the answer, it would come back in a color code automatically. If it hasn't been verified at all, it would maybe be in yellow, just suggesting caution. But like suppose that roger8grimes66@gmail is my real Gmail address. I use it all the time. It's usually in green. But one day I get it stolen, because hackers steal millions of email addresses every day. Well, the first person to report that my email address was used maliciously could report it to the Global Trust Assurance Service. They would research it, confirm it, and it would become marked in red. So anybody that has an email from me in their inbox or send items or whatever, they could literally look at my email address, see it marked in red, and go, oh, that, something's going on with Roger's email address. I need to be careful, before interfacing with Roger. And again, do that with all sorts of things there. The Global Trust Assurance Service, again, is a fully funded, it's actually got tens of thousands of employees that work there. It's got AI. It's a DNS global service that handles the centralized duties of verifying submitted things. Is that email address, file link, URL, is it been reported as being used maliciously or not? And they'd also have a global allow and block list. So, if the real Bill Gates, Bill G at Microsoft.com, that's his real email address. If he really contacted you, it'd be marked in green automatically, because it'd be a verified address, unless his email account got compromised or something like that. And let me say that again, in my solution, in order to be in levels, actually, I got this kind of backwards here. Got it backward, to be in the highest levels, you would have to have all the yeses along the trust stack. But if you failed any of those, you'd fall into the other zone and would be less trusted. So if done right, it would be very low friction. Most users wouldn't even know it's being done. It would be all baked into the operating system, application sites, and services that they visit. You go to bankofamerica.com, it's like you need real ID. Really, in most cases, users would just have to get a real ID and install that on their computer system or phone, and that would be it. The system and the sites and services would handle the rest. Most participants are not being asked to make security decisions. It just happens naturally. But computer savvy people like ourselves could be more granular if we wanted. What does my system do? It answers that basic question. Are you who you say you are? Yes, I'm Roger Grimes, real ID, trust assurance level 2. Is that program link or content what it says it is? Yes, not currently or previously marked as malicious. And let me say, we would need other things, like we need to get our coding better, because remember, we had over 40,000 separate vulnerabilities last year. And unpatched software and buggy software is still going to undermine even my solution. So we need to teach our developers and secure coding, and we need to have better, faster auto patching by default. But, and let me say, almost everything I talked about already exists. 95%. The only thing we need to create that doesn't exist is the trust assurance services, and that would be trivial to create. The rest of it already exists. 50-60% of it we already use, like the Trusted Platform Module chip or Secure Enclave chip or the M2 Titan chip. We already use it. Only thing is my solution would require that we use it more pervasively and consistently, like our TVs don't use it. You could buy a device, pad device or something. Your watch may or may not use it. In my world, in order to be in levels 2 and 3, you would have to have all those trust stack components represented in it. And again, maybe my solution isn't the right one, but we need something better than what we're doing today because none of the other solutions are working. And I want to leave you with two things before we go into questions and answers right now, which is just know that we do not have to accept the poor state of computer security today. There are better solutions. We need to demand real better solutions because what we've been trying for the last 35, 38 years has not been working. And I want to encourage y'all to participate in groups to make better solutions, like you do with the group you belong to here, that Ed's a part of, set up and is a part of. But join your IC Squared chapters if you want, or ISACA, or I belong to the World Economic Forum and the Cloud Security Alliance. Where you can make a difference, try to make a difference in whatever way you can. But just know we do not have to accept status quo. We do not have to accept hackers and malware being as bad as they are today. We can actually get solutions that significantly better secure the internet. With that, I'd love to take some questions if you all have them. And if you want to, you can always email me at rogerg@knowbefore, and you can follow me on LinkedIn. I post there every single day. I write on average 2 or 3 columns a week where I try to do thought leadership. But with that, I'd love to take some questions like, am I AI?
Hey, Roger, Marcus Hawley here. I'm going to try to facilitate this Q&A the best I can. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. First off, Roger, thank you for being here with our Carolina Cyber Network students and family. We really appreciated that. You sharing your insight there on HackerStorm and, your decades of experience here in cybersecurity. So for the students, please enter in the chat right now any questions that you might have for Roger. We'll give you a few minutes. We do have our first. Actually, Roger, can you see the chat?
I can. I just turned it on, and I do see the bottom question from Cynthia, which is, what do you see as the greatest barrier to implementing this? This is what I tell. So I've been trying to implement this for 20 years. I've written about it a lot. When I was at InfoWorld as a weekly security columnist, I presented it and defended it at multiple universities, including MIT recently. I presented it to CISA, NIST, the NSA, and I have lots of proponents within those organizations that said, yes, if implemented, this would work, but it doesn't get implemented. And one of the hardest things, there is no internet body you can submit this to. So we're like, yes, we're going to look at it. It's a great idea, and we're going to solve the internet. There is even our traditional internet security things, like used to be the Internet Signed Numbers Authority and stuff, and the IETF, Internet Engineering Task Force. You'd submit requests for comments, they call it, and it would be reviewed. They're broken and they don't really work that well anymore. For example, the only cybersecurity standard I know that has been globally adopted since 1992, and that in 1992 was SSL, now TLS, but the only global security standard is DMARC. The email DMARC standard is the only thing since 1992 that's been widely globally implemented. That was created by somebody near Asheville, Virginia, good friend of mine. But even he submitted his idea to the IETF DMARC 8-9 years ago. It's still at the IETF and has not been approved. And it is a global standard that has been implemented by almost every email service provider and client in the world. It's broken. So I really think that in order for my solution or a better solution to happen, there would have to be a tipping point event meaning the internet would go down, like, for a day. You'd have the stock market down for a day, or maybe people couldn't get to their Taylor Swift tickets for a couple hours, a panic. Oh my God. And then, well, it's like 9/11. Today's my birthday. It's also the anniversary of the United States 9/11. And there's a lot of things we improved in travel security. We put metal doors on planes, and now we all have to go through the metal detectors and stuff like that. And we have to pour our drinks out. That the terrorist experts knew that those things that they did on 9/11 could be done, but it wasn't until there was blood on the ground that you're able to get the public behind you, so that we're now all standing in lines, jumping, taking our shoes off and pouring out our liquids, because the public wouldn't have stood for it until there is blood on the ground. I think the same thing with my solution or any similar solution. It's hard to get people in your family to agree on the same thing, much less the entire world, China, Russia, India, all that stuff. Everyone's got different ideas. I think it's going to take a tipping point event, and then there'll be some mass panic, and we'll come together in some massive kumbaya and get it done. That's what I think, Cynthia. How and who is going to stop the malware? And my solution, any program that's malicious would be immediately reported to the Global Trust Assurance Service by either or name or some type of CRC check or cryptographic check. And so it wouldn't be any good. The first person that reports this is malware, and maybe a lot of malware changes and morphs all the time, we could still report, hey, this malware is originating from this particular network or IP address, or this Gmail address. Is like today, hackers steal millions of email addresses and Twitter accounts and Facebook accounts, and then they use those to send out hundreds of millions of malware attacks and social engineering attacks. With my system, the first person, like suppose my email address got stolen and they're sending out malware, the first person to report that my system or my email address is being used maliciously and confirmed quickly by the Global Trust Assurance Service, it would be marked in red. And so hackers would be less likely to create malware and send it, because it's going to be marked in red the first time somebody reports it. And if even if the malware is polymorphic and changing all the time, it's originating from somewhere. It's originating from a particular email address. It's originating from a particular network. And we could say anything coming from that network, we're just going to assume is in yellow or red. Even like, let's say password attack, or I'm sorry, software firmware attacks, where they're trying to do a buffer overflow against your software. You could tell your system, don't allow anybody to connect to me unless they're providing real ID. So they wouldn't even be able to do the buffer overflow attack against you, because you could say, I will not accept your connection for you to even send me that buffer overflow attack until you agree to give me your real ID. And let's say you have people that are creating fake real IDs or somehow compromise. Well, again, we would mark those real IDs in red, so they become, not only can they not use them in a wide scale attack, but it just becomes less, because attackers can't use malware and stolen credentials, it actually becomes far less valuable to them to steal people's emails and credentials.
Nicely said. Again, happy birthday to you. I want everybody that's listening in to know Roger Grimes is here talking about his method and solutions. We owe it to him to, one, absorb it, and two, challenge him a little bit. Let's open it up for debate. So as questions come in, let me just go ahead and ask one now, not to shoot a hole in your theory there, but let's say 10 years, 20 years from now, is this battle of hacking, is it winnable? Can we actually solve the identity problems, or will cyber criminals always have some sort of adaptation to what's going on?
Well, I mean, I think my solution creates this fabric. Like right now, every company, KnowBe4, Microsoft, Google, they've been trying to spend billions, for example, to defeat, spear phishing. Someone asks, what's spear phishing? Again, that's like an email. It appears and someone's talking to you like they know it's you. They know your name. Like I one time got called on the phone by someone said, hey, Mr. Grimes, did you buy 2 tickets from Dallas, Texas to Nigeria? I said, no. And they went, oh, we're from your bank and your credit card's been compromised and your wife's Trisha Grimes and you live at 5124, Jewel Terrace. They knew all kinds of information about me. And then they tried to trick me into giving them my login name and password for my bank account. But I was able to realize they were hackers, but they had some information about me. That's spear phishing, is when the a hacker is targeting you or a person, like a CEO of a company or some group you belong to. So it could be they're targeting your company, like maybe a massive spear phishing campaign that goes to everybody in your company or to C-level employees or your IT guy. That's spear phishing. But in my solution, I'm trying to get rid of the ability of them to do these massive long-term campaigns. I've figured the reason why they're able to do these and get away is we can't identify them. So in my solution, let me say I have flexibility in my solution. There's a lot of people that don't want to be identified, both hackers. There are many. I have friends that are privacy advocates that don't want to be identified for anything they do. Even the U.S. government. The U.S. government is trying to spy on people every day. The police are trying to get warrants to arrest mafiosa, right? And they have assumed names and identities. China would not trust our identities coming from the United States, and we're not going to trust what China says. That's why my solution kind of stops at the nation state level, and then each nation can have their own pervasive trusted ecosystem. But I think it would stop there will be types of hacking that would still occur, like denial of service attacks might still occur, possibly. Terrorists, right? Or even they're scammers. Like there are people that we know, trust, and love that would steal our money, right? You have Ponzi schemes where you have people, famous people, right, that say invest with me and they steal your money. So if someone doesn't care about being identified and is still going to commit a crime, terrorists do it all the time. I'm a terrorist and I try to blow you up or whatever. That would be you'll still have some cybercrime. But the vast majority of it, the whole typical engineering, most of that would be put down. Unpatched software, people like today, you could make a mistake and you have a misconfiguration allows a hacker in. Again, you could say, we're not going to allow you to touch my server unless you tell me exactly who you are. And somebody would say, well, I don't want to tell you who I am. Cool. And I can either deny the connection or treat that connection in such a way that at least I know that person didn't want to identify themselves. So maybe I put you through more filtering and content filtering and firewall checks or something like that. So I think that it would get rid of the vast majority of hacking and malware. Someone says down here some way, what can students do to help today? I think participate in groups just like this one, but also like I belong to the identity management working group of Cloud Security Alliance. Join that. Let people know that there are solutions that can work better, that we don't have to accept what the status quo is today. Professors, if you're a professor that teaches programming, teach secure development to your programmers. Almost no programming curricula in the world teaches secure programming. And then we wonder why we have 40,000 bugs that are exploited all the time. I think part of the reason why I'm doing this talk is that I'm trying to spread the word that there are better solutions, workable solutions. Let me say, mine's not the only solution. A guy recently tried to hire me. He started a new company, said he was worth $1 billion, and he wanted to hire me to create a more secure internet that people would pay to be on. So if you wanted to be on the secure internet, you had to pay a fee and you get on his internet and you connect people over his internet. That's a possible solution. I don't want people to have to pay for this. I want I want it to be an open standard. So you can participate if you want. The devices you buy can participate if you want, but if you want to be anonymous, you don't have to participate. And my solution, if you decide that you don't want to participate, you can say, I'm not participating, and no harm happens to you except for you cannot connect to someone that requires real ID. That's the only penalty. And certainly that would probably, like I would say, I don't want an email. If you don't want to provide me your real name, I don't want your email. But you get to choose whether or not, it's like going to the DMV or going to buy liquor today. If you want to buy alcohol from a state-sponsored store, you have to provide real ID. You want to drive a car, you got to have real ID. You want to go on a cruise, you got to have real ID. You want to travel on an airplane, you got to have real ID. Same thing here. But I make it pervasive, a fabric that anybody can take advantage of so that it's just a little harder for hackers and their malware creations to hide. What would make tech companies or big organizations want to switch? I mean, so first of all, I don't think they're going to unless there's some big tipping point event. And in college and stuff, we're told be proactive, take the initiative. In real life, that's not the way real life works. In real life, nobody does anything until after the pain has happened. That is the sad fact. I've been waiting for a better solution to happen for 38 years and it hasn't happened. But what I will say is that I think the incentive for companies to join is right now, every company, for example, 70 to 90% of hacking involves phishing. Imagine if we could eradicate the vast majority of that, right? That would be good for every company. That'd be good for Microsoft, Google. The whole reason I'm doing this solution is not because of me. I know how to stay out of hacking. I know how to keep my systems patched. I know how not to be socially engineered. Not everybody knows that. Trying to make a better system for everybody else, for our kids, our grandkids, my mother, my grandparents, right? Like every day, old people are called and swindled out of their life savings. Tens of thousands of old people lose everything every single day. My local bank, Bank of America, told me that every day they stop at least 2 to 3 scams. Old people show up at the bank, withdraw all their money, and they think they're saving the money. They've been called by the FBI and told to move their money from this to a safe government account, and it's all a scam. And the old people, when they're stopped from getting all their money, get pissed off at Bank of America. I'm never doing business with you all again. I'm going to take all my money. They're actually upset because they think they're saving the world or saving their money. So I want to create a service that they don't even get their computer systems configured, their phones configured, their messaging is configured. So if the person doesn't identify themselves to the real person, the real organization they're with, they can't even connect to that old person. So, I mean, I'd have to think everybody would love it, because if most of the internet's malicious, most emails are malicious, and we can get rid of that, I have to think that that's got to benefit everybody involved. Someone says, given the user ID, really, what's and other factors protected different? How is users' data? How would we protect real ID and other things? Again, the real ID, I would want it to be on a bound device. The bound device could be your phone, your laptop, but so this is a FIDO YubiKey, FIDO-enabled YubiKey that I use for some of my personal accounts. I have another one for my work accounts. But my identity is stored on here and protected by a hardware cryptographic chip. And it is very difficult for a remote attacker to steal remotely. They can't get to the private key that is my identity. So mine would require that the real ID, that a person go in person. So most fraudulent people, most scammers are not going to show up in person at a place like the DMV and try to claim to be somebody else. And again, if they were using that ID, or maybe someone is able to somehow, there's some 0 day and they steal my identity, it would be reported to the Global Trust Assurance Service that my identity isn't trustworthy, right? So it would be marked in red. Or suppose someone stole my email account, they're using it to do bad things. It gets marked in red, but eventually maybe I regain control of it. Most people that have their email account stolen don't regain control. But suppose I get control back, I could see that the level would go from red to maybe yellow over time to maybe green, right? Once I've proven that I can maintain control of my account, or maybe it stays yellow the rest of my life because it's been compromised before. And if you've been compromised once, you're more likely to be compromised a second time. So that's what I would say, is that like a lot of 33% of compromise involves somebody attacking your unpatched software firmware. If you said to my system, you cannot connect to my system without providing real ID, they can't even initiate that vulnerability attempt, right? Unless they'd have to find a vulnerability in the local trust assurance service, which I have in my book. It has to be a very secure. It has to have its own hardware enforced hypervisor. And if I look at historically, things that are secured with a hardware enforced hypervisor are significantly harder to compromise than stuff that isn't. So in my solution, the local trust assurance service is in a hardware enforced hypervisor. And to date, for 38 years, no hacking attack has significantly impacted a hardware secured hypervisor application. Now, there have been some test cases and stuff and some minor ones, but it's never been widespread because it's just too difficult to do.
I love this question. probability in the far future for microchip implants.
yeah, yeah, I
And
don't
then the
know.
one under that, like how to, what's the difference, the real ID and other identification factors protecting any differently. So
That's the one I just spoke to.
Mhm.
Again, hardware bound, have to show up in person. But going back to the microchip implants, I think that it's probably 100% that we're all going to be implanted, and I think we're going to beg for it. I think the U.S. government's going to say, "Hey, you don't want your baby or kid kidnapped? Chip them, right? We chip our pets." I think eventually, the way that if you look at past history, we beg for the privacy invasions, right? Our phones now take 10,000 data points of what we're doing every second and sell it to other people. Every device we have sells our privacy to other companies to the highest bidder or for free. We live in a high surveillance environment. I can't believe the Charlie Kirk guy hasn't been caught yet. I think he will be caught, right? Because how do you travel to or from the place without being caught on 100 cameras, 100 license plate readers, that sort of stuff. But so do I think we'll be chipped with a Neuralink? I don't know if it'd be Musk's Neuralink, but I think there is a really good chance in the next 25 years that we will beg the government to chip our kids. Like they're just going to go, hey, if you're chipped, you'll be able to get faster health care and it's more secure. And we'll go, oh, yes, please chip my kid, just like we're chipping our dogs and cats today. If I look at history. I think it's a good chance we'll be chipped. I don't know if I'll be chipped, but I think my kids or grandkids will be chipped.
That's always an interesting one. We brought that one up on the military side too, and what the government would do with your ID cards, your CAT cards, and all of that. So I guess I had a question as we wait for other students and family to stick a few questions in there. I guess more on, let's say companies do, bring on this real ID, and they're wanting, like you said, hey, you're not going to get any information from me if you're not going to give me any of your information. Will this stop any freedoms online for people that don't want to give that?
Yeah, so it might. Like, suppose you want to connect to Bank of America and not give your real identity. Bank of America could say, we're not going to accept anybody but real ID. But let me say, again, there's two. What's interesting about my solution, and I've thought about this for decades, is there's two very different groups of people that don't want their privacy invaded. There's the privacy advocates, which I have several friends that are that way, that don't want to be identified at all. They don't even bring real ID to the airport. Until prior to real ID being required, they could still travel. Now they can't travel. But then the other side is the U.S. government and law enforcement. They want to spy on people and eavesdrop on people and not be identified, right? And even in our U.S. government today, fake people get passports, right? They create these fake names and fake identities, and they give them to them in the NSA and the FBI and stuff, and they can go places with the fake identities. People do get fake driver's licenses, right? Like people show up at DMV and they have the right documents, but in the wrong name, or they bribe somebody at DMV. It does happen. It's not perfect. But in my system, we'd get rid of this wide, rampant thing where anyone can scam. You and I can go criminally attack other people and never get in trouble, right? That's what I'm trying to stop. And I think it's a good question to ask how my solution impacts privacy. What I would say is, in my solution, you don't have to be in it. So you can stay and use everything you use today. I think you thinking that you have privacy is kind of a joke today. You have to go to extreme forms of using boot up images, using a reliable VPN in different locations, and not use the same login name and passwords. And if you look at what it takes to be truly anonymous today, most people do not want to make that effort. And you are not. Most of us are highly identified in every single thing we do. The computer and computer systems know us better than our spouses know us. And the idea that anyone thinks they have privacy today for decades is just kidding themselves, unless you go to very extreme forms of being anonymous. But in my system, it does have that ID where you're allowed to attempt to be anonymous. You can stay the same as you are today. And the only thing you won't be able to do is participate in systems that require real ID, right, for that connection. And so, somebody signing people up for political protests may take all of the anonymous. Someone that wants to do a cryptocurrency account out in the Bahamas can do all anonymous, right? But then people participating with that will know they could do a rug pull and steal all your money, right? So the only difference is my system allows people to have a choice. If I ask for your real ID and you say no, then that person has, I and that person can negotiate whether we'll do it without real ID, or maybe I wanted to be anonymous. Now they're asking my real ID. I can choose whether or not I'm going to provide it, or say, nope, you know what? I appreciate it, but no, thank you, something like that. So I think my system preserves privacy as much as it could be under this sort of system. And I challenge anyone making any other system to try to make a better privacy system. I welcome if anyone can. Let me say, I think my system, even though most of the stuff already exists and we only have to invent one thing, I think my system's kind of complex. And I welcome anybody making a simpler system because I think complexity is an antithesis of security. And if you can make something simpler that works as well or better than mine, I'll support it. I really will. Let's see. Another question. What steps do you take to verify and combat any potential malicious activity or experience? Really, again, anytime someone does something malicious to you, you could report it to the Global Trust Assurance Service. If they send you an email, they send you a file link, they send you a file attachment, you could immediately submit it to the Global Trust Assurance Service. That service in my book says it has like a 10-minute guaranteed service level turnaround. And will tell you whether or not, and again, without you doing anything, it happens automatically anyways, any way that they could possibly, a telephone number, any of that is automatically submitted and then color coded in red, green, or, red, green, or yellow. So that's how I think I would have to do it. Citizens of undeveloped countries do not know about malware and hackers, so they get easily targeted by hackers. My question is, what can be done to make them more aware? Well, my company does security awareness training, so we try to make them more aware. But more importantly, what we need to do is make our computer systems more reliable and trustworthy by default. Like kind of like today's cars are getting to the point, we're almost to the point with a lot of cars where they really try to keep you out of an accident, right? There's anti-lock brakes. My car today, if it sees me accelerating too fast to the car in front of me, automatically brakes. There's lane control things. My seat vibrates if I'm getting, if I'm making a turn without a turn signal. Well, that's what we kind of, I think I would love it if we had less awareness, that people could just trust that their computing experience was more trustworthy. Right now, computers are untrustworthy altogether. The internet is untrustworthy, Wi-Fi untrustworthy. I would like to make it so that the default behavior is that we can trust it, right? And that behind the scenes, it's like anti-lock brakes, anti-collision sensors, that it's handling the stuff for me, right? So if I go to Bank of America, it requests so the only thing I had to as a participant, if I wanted to participate in it, is get a real ID, install that on my devices. After that, everything just kind of works like it works. If I connect to a bank, it wants real ID. If I connect to Twitter, maybe it doesn't ask for real ID. But if somebody sends me, maybe somebody compromises my aunt's account and she's sending me an email, or a Facebook message saying, hey, can you send me money? Cool. I could say, I want it, but I'm going to request your real ID, right? So that I could have some additional confirmation if I wanted. And your system could possibly be configured to detect that. Oh, someone's asking you for money. We're going to do real ID. And on top of that, again, every email address, every connection point is always submitted to the Global Trust Assurance, if you want it, for automatic verification, so that these compromised connections can't be used for long without being reported and becoming worthless to the attacker. And you can say, well, suppose we had Russia or China create a bunch of fake stuff, fake files, fake accounts. Cool. Once the Global Trust Assurance Service goes, hey, we're getting a lot of fake accounts, we're going to block them all. So that's how I think my system would handle some of the widespread stuff.
Nicely put. As we're closing up here, Roger, I know we can keep this going forever, but the 90 minutes time lapse is coming up. I just want to thank you again for taking the time to share your expertise and experiences with our Carolina Cyber Network students. The ideas you've walked us through, the identity, trust, and the future of defeating cyber criminals, that's the challenge, right, that our students are about to tackle. So, I challenge them to grab a copy of your books coming up, and then, hey, like minds. Let's get to the bottom of this thing. So again, happy birthday, sir.
Thank you.
Happy 21st birthday. It was great, talking to you, and hearing from you. So we're gonna go ahead and close this up. Look forward to our next session.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. And continue to fight the good fight.
Take care, all.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you.
Thank you.